Well, welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good, and today we're diving deep into one of the most influential networking books ever written with its author, Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone, which has transformed how millions of professionals think about relationship building and career success. Keith went from being a son of a Pennsylvania steelworker to becoming the youngest CMO at Starwood Hotels, the CEO of Yaya Media, attributing much of his success to the power of authentic relationship building. His philosophy isn't about manipulation or quid pro quo, it's about genuine connection and generosity. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. Welcome to the program, Keith.
Charles, thanks for having me. Looking forward to getting to know your audience.
Good. I always like to have our audience learn more about you. They probably know a lot, but if you could just give your background and just kind of what led you up to this moment, and especially in writing this.
Well, I think you said it. I mean, I came from a very poor immigrant family, landed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was the crash of the steel industry. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. And the intention was to make sure that this kid, myself, had the biggest opportunity possible in the United States. And, for me, what I learned very early on is that relationships were the defining factor of our success. And that really came because I was a poor kid getting a local job at the country club. The steel industries had crashed, and the local country club was where the rich people played golf. And I watched how wealthy people got their kids jobs, etc. What I realized was that it's actually through the relationships, not necessarily through birthright, that opportunity gets created. I didn't have to be born into these families, but if I had a relationship with individuals that I got to know through carrying their golf clubs, opportunities and doors would open. And I use that as a leverage for the rest of my life. You mentioned Starwood Hotels. That was one of my jobs, but I was also the youngest partner ever elected at Deloitte. And from the very day I walked in as a summer intern to the day that I became the youngest partner elected and the chief marketing officer of all of Deloitte, it's critical relationship management that opened the doors of opportunity. Today, by the way, we can talk about this a little bit later, but today I coach the Fortune 100 executive teams. I coach unicorns, even governments. And I am leading one of the largest, most successful, high-performing team coaching organizations in the world.
Let's start with that core philosophy for you to unpack a little bit more, because you argue that generosity is a currency of networking, and that really comes before receiving. And I think this is needed now more than ever because everyone's trying to be an influencer, trying to get their word out, and they don't lead with generosity. They want to lead with how great they are in trying to make sure that they're known in the marketplace.
Yeah, if you follow my social posts, everything that I put out there is generous. It's not just, watch me get my hair done or, that sort of thing. It's always I always ask the question, what does the audience who's following, what do they learn? How do they advance themselves in some way? And that's true of how we use social media. But if I go back in history a little bit, very early on, I learned this lesson at the golf course. There was a golfer named Mrs. Poland who helped me like you can't imagine. I had shared with her my dreams. My parents were unemployed. She helped me meet people I wanted to get to know. She helped my parents get jobs. And when I look back, I asked her, Mrs. Poland, why were you so generous to me? She said, Keith, you took 2 strokes off of my golf score. And now reciprocity is critical, right? What I have found is that reciprocity, when you're keeping score, is transactional. But reciprocity, where you put out their generosity to the world, identify the kind of people that you want to hang out with and find ways to serve them, that is the advantage that you can gain in your networking abilities. Give you one other example. When I was at Deloitte, the CEO of Deloitte, a guy named Pat LeConto, had decided that he wanted Deloitte at the time back in the 90s to rise up and equal the Accentures and the McKinseys of the world. Well, that was unlikely given that we were the lowest of the big 8. What I did when I heard him say that at a meeting of 2,000 people, I went and did some research. I called a professor of mine and I said, I'd like to do a white paper on the subject of professional services marketing. Remember, I'm a kid. I'm an intern. I'm in my 20s. I went out and I interviewed the chief marketing officer of McKinsey, Bill Madisoni, uh, Jim Murphy at Accenture, and a bunch of others. And I said to all of them, I'm curious what professional services marketing is, and I'm writing a white paper for school, and I would love to get your impression. What I'm doing is I will accumulate all this information. I'll give it back to all of you. So even in my ask of them, I was being generous. I was sort of doing a mini Gartner Group study. Well, I did all of this, and I accumulated a roadmap for what it would mean to be a world-class marketer. I gave that to Pat LaConto, the CEO of Deloitte. He was blown away. He was like, Keith, none of my partners had ever thought about doing this kind of advanced thinking or research or work. He said, why don't you come and work with me at central headquarters and help redefine the future of marketing for Deloitte? And I said, well, I'll do it if you consider making me the chief marketing officer. And he's like, no, of course not. You're a child. Well, within a year, I built the relationship even further based on that sense of generosity that they had to make me partner because I was on the executive team. And they made me the chief marketing officer.
Great story. And that generosity first mindset is fascinating. And it leads me to wonder about something you emphasize throughout the book, that you have this powerful concept of build before you need it. Most people network when they're job hunting or need something specific right now. Why is this reactive approach so limiting? And what does a proactive relationship building actually look like in practice?
Well, there's a practice that I teach in Never Eat Alone called relationship action planning, building a wrap. And building a wrap means you start with your goals. By the way, recently we just started an online community called connectedsuccess.com. And we teach people over an 8-week period how to really double down and let the relationships of your life fundamentally redefine your future. And it starts with focus. What do you want to achieve in your life? Target. Who are the kind of individuals, if you built the relationship with them, you would open opportunities for yourself and you would gain greater advantage. Define what you can do for them. FTD, focus, target, define. Define what you could do for them. And then connect with connectors. One of the things I learned early on is that aligning with people who have good networks, who are adjacent to what you're trying to do, is a great way to advance each other. One of my best friends is a guy named Peter Diamandis, another great thought leader. Peter and I are constantly swapping our networks for each other. He's a deeply connected person. I'm a deeply connected person. And we're always figuring out how we can be of service to each other. Focus, target, define, align with somebody, outreach. Keep your outreach to the people that you've targeted on a regular basis. Don't ever fall behind in building those relationships. And then make sure that you constantly renew that plan, that relationship action plan. That simple idea, very purposefully targeted against your dreams, hopes, and aspirations, no matter what they are, personal or professional, will assure an extraordinary level of success for yourself.
And as you mentioned, network is like a muscle. I mean, to be a good networker, the more you work at it, the bigger it gets. But you have to do the work consistently, not just when you need something from it, which I think a lot of leaders miss. And you mentioned that isolation, not a lack of talent, holds people back. So for listeners who feel awkward about networking or worry about being too pushy, what are some practical steps do you recommend for them to overcome that sense of isolation and build authentic connections?
Well, there's two things embedded in that. One is if you have a regular process or a regular set of practices, then you can exercise, as you said, exercise that muscle. And it's not something that you have to innately or organically know how to do. So if you write the names of the people down that you want to build relationships with, if you share those regularly with people that you know, if you do proactive outreach of people that you've already met, there's a chapter in the book called Follow Up or Fail. Right after you've met somebody, how do you specifically make sure you're right back in front of them, giving more generosity so that you solidify the relationship and the relationship sticks? Process for those of us, and I'm an introvert, for those of us who are introverts, having a process and a rigor associated with it makes it a lot easier than to just trust our instincts. So that's number one. The second thing is, this isn't manipulative. It's very authentic. Like when I identify the people I want to build relationships with in service of some goal of mine, I am deciding I'm going to go build real relationships, real connected, authentic relationships. I'm reaching out with generosity. I'm not reaching out with an ask for me. So I generally find that those of us who are introverted are much more comfortable with a generous, authentic mechanism of reaching out to people as opposed to contrived, shucking and jiving like you might have thought of traditional networking.
What's helped me is that most people want to connect too. They're often just as nervous as you are. So when you approach someone with genuine interest, right, in their work or their success, you're giving them a gift, and that gift is really being heard and valued by them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, once people get past that initial hurdle, you talk about something or some very specific tactics. One that really caught my attention was, this whole concept of the never eat alone principle itself, the idea of consistently inviting others into into your meals, into conversations. Can you share a personal story of how this simple practice has affected your own opportunities and relationships over the years?
Yeah. Look, I mean, everything that I plan to do, I ask myself, who could I do it with? Yesterday was a Sunday, and there was an executive that is thinking about a transition from one job to another and wanted a little bit of my time and get my advice. I went one step further. I said, hey, if you want, why don't you go to, I go to this workout at Barry's boot camp. I said, why don't you go to Barry's boot camp with me and we'll grab brunch after? Those are two things I would have done anyway, right? But now I'm having somebody else join me in that activity. The benefit of that is also that it's stepping over the threshold into a level of familiarity that's very different than if we would just set up a Zoom call, right? So the ability to assume familiarity, invite people into your life, break bread with them, go out and have drinks with them, just and ask yourself, and how are you spending your time, and could you invite others into it? So that's a very important area. Now, the other thing I've done is I've created communities. So I now have several communities of practice. So there's a community of CIOs that I've created where I'm just the host of this community, and I'm helping them coach each other on how they're using AI to break through in this new world of work that we're in today. So by hosting and facilitating, it takes some of the burden off of you. You're not just running around adding value as an individual. The community starts adding value to each other.
And when you consistently practice never eating alone, you create a continuous stream, right, of relationship building moments that compound over time and is there to help you moving forward as well as helping other individuals as part of that network as well.
Indeed, indeed.
But you also talk more about those strategic approaches, particularly making sure that you're prepared and you emphasize doing your homework, which should be self-evident and common sense before meeting someone, especially in our digital age where we have access to so much more information than ever.
Yeah.
But there's also that risk of seeming like we're stalking someone online. So, how do you balance being prepared with also being authentic and natural?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's perfectly appropriate when you reach out to somebody. So one of the things I do is I assign a relationship quality to score to people. If you don't know somebody, they're a zero. If they've exchanged emails with you, they're a one. If you've met them, they're a two. If you consider them an acquaintance, or sometimes we call them friends in the workplace, they're a three. If they're a real friend, hanging out with them on weekends, texting them on weekends, talking about personal information, etc., they're a four. And if they're evangelizing for you, they're a five. So how you reach out to somebody and what kind of tactics and strategies you use, and it varies whether it's a zero to a five. But in all cases, you should be asking yourself, how do I add generosity to the relationship? If somebody's a zero, the easiest thing to do to build a relationship is have a referral, somebody who knows you collectively. You can look at LinkedIn and other things in order to figure that out. You can also cold call somebody and reach out and say, hey, listen, I've done my research about you. I would highly like to get to know you and find ways that we could work together. Here are some things that I think we could talk about if we did. I notice you're interested in this charity. I've got some friends who are equally interested. I'd love to make that an introduction. I saw some of the things you were doing online. I have some ideas on how you can make your online followership even better than it is today. Like whatever it is, like there's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, this relationship is meaningful. I'm coming prepared to be generous. Here are some ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. Somebody did some research on me. They found out I'm a foster father, and they would, and they know that my foundation focuses on foster care. If they want to say that they know other people who are interested in foster care and they'd love to make that introduction, I would consider that an advantage, not a creepy thing to do.
Is there a script or a methodology to help managers and leaders to get better at that and feel more
I
comfortable
think
with
I
it?
just did it, which is referral. Number one, find somebody you know in common. Number two is be of deep generosity. Now, here's the other thing. If you're going to reach out to a friend and say, hey, I notice you're connected with so-and-so on LinkedIn, you better be able to convince that person that by making an introduction of you, they're doing that person a favor. So no one wants to make an introduction of somebody who's just a taker. So, if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I know you know so-and-so, would you make an introduction? I'm like, okay, tell me what you're going to do for them so that they're excited about that introduction.
How about with follow up? Because that's where I see a lot of networking attempts die. And you say follow up or fail. What are some of the
Yeah,
best
it just needs to
practices?
be a reactive tool. It's like every time you go to, when I go to a conference, last week I was at 3 of them, big ones. And as soon as I walk out of the room, I logged every individual I met. So I do lots of things. Like, for instance, I'll take my phone, and when I meet somebody, I'll say to them, let's stay in touch. Why don't we exchange cell phones? I said, do you text? And when I do, I take a picture of the two of us and I say, hey, let's take a picture. I always put it at the top of the text thread so we remember who it is. Now I've got a picture of the person that I can now remember when I leave the party, when I leave the event. I've got a picture of the two of us. I've got a text thread that's already opened. And now I can begin that dialogue in a much more earnest way. But definitely every time I leave a meeting, no matter whether it's an online meeting like this or an event that I happen to be going to, I log it into my personal CRM system. And there's lots of different ones. And it could be literally just a spreadsheet if you want, but there's lots of personalized CRM systems out there you can use to log your information. And even simple little information about, oh, so-and-so as a daughter going to college, those kind of things. That information is important. Next time you can connect with them, you can say, well, how's Susie doing?
When you mentioned too, timeliness is key in that follow up, is making sure that you're doing it at the right cadence and doing it sooner rather than later.
Indeed.
Before we wrap up this episode, just want to talk about personal brand because you dedicate a portion of the book to that in the digital tools. For someone just starting their career or someone who's been focused purely on technical skills, what's that first step in developing a brand that
Yeah.
really attracts the right relationships?
Yeah, there's a wonderful group I spoke to last week, which is a group of women in technology at all different levels of the organization. And one of the things I recommended to them is to identify some vision that they have that they would like to learn more about. And let's say you're a technologist in an organization. Let's say it's a healthcare company, and you're intrigued by the future of AI-enabled patient care. I don't know, making it up, right? You now have an opportunity to reach out to people you admire in the company and say, I'm writing something, just like I did with Pat Lecanto. I'm writing something around AI enabled patient care. And I'd love to get your input into this. When I accumulate the wisdom that I'm going to be gaining, I would love to do two things. I'll get you all of the information back so that you can share what I've learned. And two, I'm going to host a discussion where some of the people who are really intriguing can come together and talk to each other. Now, what just happened to you? At the end of this exercise, you've now not only become an expert, but you've created a community. You've created a community of like-minded individuals around that topic. So this is the way we build our brands. And then you start posting on this stuff. And now all of a sudden, you're a thought leader. Don't think that the time it is for you to post and decide to write about something is once you become an expert. Think about the fact that along the way to becoming an expert, that's the time that you think about writing about what you're learning.
That's a critical distinction. You're right. How about since this book was published in 2005, updates since then, how have the digital tools, remote work, social media changed the networking game? And maybe what new opportunities and challenges do professionals face in building strong relationships today?
Yeah, I mean, the book, we're actually having conversations. It's been updated once already with in a modern internet era a number of years ago. But we're even having conversations now, like we don't cold call anymore. A cold call is an outreach usually via an email or something like that, or even on social media. Triangulation is important. If you want to get to know somebody, you can send them an email, but you might as well also send them a DM on LinkedIn. Might as well start following and commenting other content on LinkedIn. So there's all of these triangulations that are now available to us, information that's available to us that we didn't have before. AI gives us a pathway of getting to know somebody better, et cetera. So there is a lot, and that's why we started this Beyond Connections. It's called Beyond Connections, but you find it at connectedsuccess.com. That's why we created this, because we want to keep people current in their ability to continue to build the relationships that will make them as successful as they dream.
For listeners who want to start implementing these principles tomorrow, what would you say is the single most important habit to develop first?
Probably follow up or fail. Well, actually, no, I take that back. It's getting intentional about who you want to build relationships with and sharing that with others. That's probably the most important thing. Identify, just like you have a to-do list, maybe you have a financial plan, start your relationship action planning.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.